Yes, make sure we're good in the back here. We're all good? Yes, we're ready to go. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Okay, we brought back, our proposal, and we've given you a copy, and we have it on the screen. And Justin's going to walk you through it.
Thank you. So we basically took your base document and then, amended it with our counters and infused some of our proposals that were discussed last time. In the kind of preamble area, this is just something we find that we use the word teachers a lot, but then we have people in our bargaining unit that aren't teachers, and so we're just for the sake of this document and practice, we might try to start using bargaining unit members as a way to not specifically pinpoint people because things might apply to everybody or not. So just so you see that's a preference on our part. Scrolling down to general expectations. So item A, we countered your proposal with all applicable bargaining unit members will be expected to provide content, classwork, and homework to quarantine students as needed in Google Classroom. So we crossed off some of one. I guess we discussed this briefly before. I don't know if your position is different or if you're agreeable to our position, but we just think that if this is a MOU for quarantine learning and no students are quarantined, that things should be normal for a teacher. So again, an example, if I'm a high school teacher, I've got 5 class periods and there are 0 students on quarantine, it's just our feeling that doing extra work for the sake of it, for routine, I guess, doesn't make a lot of sense. If 100% of my kids are present or 100% are not quarantined, they'll receive all the instruction and materials by nature of being in class. We know that a lot of teachers voluntarily put stuff online anyway. We just don't want, we know we've heard teachers talk about there is time involved in going into each of your Google Classrooms, uploading agendas and uploading documents every day. And if nobody's there to receive it, we just would prefer not to have that additional work without purpose. We also stuck with just Google Classroom. We feel like the teachers are well versed at this point and know what other software and platforms are available. And we worry sometimes, we saw last year where we had articulated kind of a list of examples. Some administrators had taken that to mean that like this is what they should be using. So we feel that these teachers have an abundance of experience at this point after almost a year and a half of some version of distance learning, hybrid learning, and all that. So we just kind of wanted to reduce it to the standard, which is Google Classroom, and then they can certainly use anything else at their purview.
Okay.
And just for explanation's sake, obviously the striked out red is language that had been in your original proposals, and the green is additional language in our counters. I'll get to blue once we get to blue. There's only a couple instances of that too. Item B, if a class contains quarantined students, the daily agenda will be posted at the beginning of each class period. The format of the agenda will mirror that's posted on the board in a traditional classroom. Posting an image or picture of an agenda is acceptable. So here, again, we're following suit with our logic that if there are quarantined students, then there's a need for the online activity and Google Classroom activity and the posting of an agenda. If everyone's in class, who exactly is the agenda being posted for is our thought there. And then we ran into this last year where, again, to input data into Google Classroom, especially if you have 5 different periods at the secondary levels, takes time. We found that there was a request. Some schools were not allowing teachers to simply take a picture, an image from their whiteboard, and then put that image on their Google Classroom for the agenda. They were literally not allowing that and then asking them to retype their agenda that they literally just wrote on their board. So we're just asking that I can use the image for the agenda and not have to go through the task of retyping it, in the Google Classrooms, because that was a concern last year that it wasn't clear, and then there was discrepancies about whether that had to happen or not.
Okay.
And feel free at any point, if you have a question, by all means, to ask. Item C, your COVID tutorial program. We just wanted to make clear, I think it was your intent, unless you tell me otherwise, that this is a voluntary basis. The language that had initially been proposed to us said the principal will select teachers to participate. We assumed that meant from a list of volunteers, not I can literally assign you to be a tutor from 3 to 5 after school today. So we just wanted to make that clear if it wasn't in the language before. And then to further elaborate on that at the end, this program is voluntary and no bargaining unit member will be compelled to participate in the COVID tutorial program. Are we correct in assuming that this was meant to be voluntary, or was there the district planning to kind of create a tutoring assignment even if a teacher did not volunteer for that?
I mean, voluntary would be ideal. We do have a responsibility for the students that are sent home to provide support, instructional support. I'd like to take that one back to my team maybe when we get the chance to see if we feel like we're comfortable with leaving it to a volunteer basis, or do we need to have some language that says, first we'll try to go through a volunteer route, but if it becomes necessary that we might have to assign. So let me circle back on that one.
Okay, we would appreciate that. Item D is a reduced version of a proposal that we put forth last week. Remember, we said we had concerns because there were instances in schools where principals were delegating finding coverage responsibilities to teachers who were absent. And in the contract, and we didn't post the whole thing in our proposal today, we just reduced it to the sentence or two that we thought was most relevant to our concern. As a reminder, in each school, the principal will develop a process for securing substitutes. This process will provide that no employee shall be required to obtain his or her own substitute. We just want to make sure that it is the responsibility of administration. If I'm sick or I'm quarantined and someone needs to cover my classes, we don't feel it's appropriate. It's actually, that's in the contract as it's stated in this proposal. I don't want to have to ask my coworkers to cover for me when I'm absent. That's simply not my responsibility and not even allowed in the current contract, but it is happening in instances that we've been hearing.
Okay.
Item E, we left this one in. I know we talked about it before. Our last offer involved compensation, but we still wanted to have some sort of dialogue to potentially come to an understanding on this. Our concerns with the breakfast supervision duty are that, as you know, I won't go into it, but in the past, it simply had not been required, and that would allow teachers, most specifically at elementary and middle school levels, because this isn't a high school concern, they would come to work, the duty day started, they would have a solid 15 minutes where they could get themselves together, make copies, set up their whiteboard, etc. Fast forward to this year, there are schools requiring the teachers to let these students in from the minute that the duty day starts. So in addition to now having to supervise and not being able to do those prep activities in the morning, we also note that in your proposal and in what would be our counter that we would agree to is that if they have to post agendas online and they have to put content online in the morning and simultaneously supervise kids and stand by we just find that there are a lot of duties now that are physically not possible to do all at once, or someone would have to neglect some of them. So we don't know what the solution is. If money isn't the solution, maybe some sort of guarantee that, the reliance on supervision in the classroom, letting kids in from the moment school starts, those first 15 minutes before classes begin, some sort of restriction or safeguard where that's not the default, that a principal just decides, that's the easiest way to handle kids in the morning for me and our school. We're not going to open the cafeteria. We're not going to open common areas where kids could spread out and disperse during that common time before school. We worry that as more responsibilities are put on teachers, whether it's covering classes during planning or doing morning supervision or parent pickups at the end of the day that take longer, that there's only so much time in the day, and more responsibilities and less time to do those responsibilities to us. We're just hoping that there's something that can be done to try to mitigate that or limit that. we don't have an exact solution beyond our initial offer of compensation, but if that's something you guys could chew on and potentially, if that's a concern that you're willing to agree might need to have some sort of safeguards, we'd appreciate that.
Right, and the reason we, put compensation in there is because it will, the job that the teachers have to do will have to get done. There's no way they can not post their agendas for the students each day because the contract requires it, the MOU requires it rather. And so if they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it before 7:30, before their duty day starts. And so we're saying that's why we're saying that the compensation would be more appropriate for this one, because there's no time to do it other than before the school day starts.
Thank you, Theo. And item F that we've added to general expectations, we mentioned last time that to us, a fundamental aspect of what we're talking about this year in particular, because last year when we negotiated the MOUs, the federal dollars really had not been allocated yet. You had the small tranche from the first bill that only gave about 40 million, and then in the fall came the next large federal injection of funds, and then after the presidential election, another one. So we do feel compensation is an important aspect for this year and in consideration of what's taken place over the past year and what will take place this year. So we have a compensation package as a first offer just to kick the tires. I'll read it. Item F under 1 is compensation for extraordinary working conditions and increased workloads due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All bargaining union members will receive a $3,500 one-time bonus for their efforts. Raises for the 2021-2022 school year shall be 3.5% for highly effective rated bargaining unit members and 2.75 for those rated effective. And I apologize, there is one additional item missing, and that was the $1,000 for the 1,300 or so bargaining unit members who were excluded in state law from the bonuses awarded by the governor. I apologize, that somehow has gotten edited out. I left that out. But that is one of the 3 components there.
And those percentages we're offering, they're inclusive of the COLA, of a 0.5% COLA.
Okay, I've made a note of the $1,000 for members of the union that were left out by the governor's proposal. Okay.
Thank you. So moving on to item 2, daily instruction. Our counter incorporates some questions here about your initial proposal, and I guess this also relates a little bit to the references to Flipgrid in items 1A, and then subsequent references to recorded instruction. Is, for clarification purposes, what the district had proposed last time, is it the district's desire that teachers utilize Google Meet during instruction for the sake of recording live lessons that will be posted to Google Classroom, and then students who are quarantined would access them after the fact? Or do you want teachers to admit students through Google Meet? Is it purely recording and posting and then they can access, or is it access while they're teaching remotely? We just wanted to get clarification on that.
Yeah, we wrestled with that a little bit. Ultimately, we'd like to have the recording. So to leave it to the teacher, I guess, if they want to do it live, well, yeah, I mean, they could just record themselves live, record it, post it up, but we don't necessarily have to have them admitting students to the Google Meet.
So that was I guess the linchpin of our clarification is, so teachers will not be required to give a link to admit students virtually akin to simultaneous teaching. If that's their prerogative, there are teachers doing that literally right now of their own volition, but not to be redundant, but so the district's position is use Google Meet for the purpose of recording and then post, not use Google Meet and admit students who are not present in class.
Right, and part of our thinking on that is we don't want to do anything that kind of distracts or compromises the instruction that's taken place for the students in person. So we thought, just doing the recording and making it available as soon as possible through the Google Classroom might be a way to try to safeguard the instructions to, the instruction taking place, that the less opportunity for distraction, that type of thing.
Okay, understood, and we appreciate that clarification. Again, anything in blue is just stuff that we wanted to say is we're interested in discussing because you put it out there, or we put it out there, we just didn't have clarification, or we wanted to make sure there was increased dialogue. So thank you for that clarification. Yes.
Okay, so the only concern that has been brought to our attention potentially is when you upload these and then they watch them, the students watch them at home, is the potential for I'm watching it and all of a sudden mommy and daddy come in, or grandma and grandpa, and they don't like what they see the teacher teaching. We don't want blowback on teachers from that type of situation. Because, that has happened, and we want to make sure that we're safeguarding the instructional process for the teachers and the students.
So we did have language, it's not in our proposal as is because we hadn't really incorporated the camera recording stuff until we got clarification at a minimum. But we did have language last year that said something to the effect that, videos can only be used as like a secondary source. So if a complaint is lodged, then potentially the videos could be used for investigation. But I guess administrators could not just kind of watch all my videos and try to find something objectionable or start an investigation based on their, I guess, adventure.
Right, we were just saying that the videos can only be used as a secondary source to any kind of disciplinary action. That's all, not a primary source, but a secondary source.
Okay,
And that was in the last year's MOU of the year.
okay, we're open to that. We're just trying to make the best out of a tough situation for the students, not to try to incriminate anybody.
Gotcha. We struck item 2B just for the same reason as we struck some of the other examples in item 1A, is just that we feel that the teachers are knowledgeable of all the different styles of instruction or modalities that they would utilize. So we just feel like it's not necessary to tell the teachers what their job is every day, because they do these things every day as a function of delivering instruction, whether it's COVID or otherwise. Item C, which under our proposal would actually become item B, we feel more comfortable with the term quarantine students as opposed to absent students, because absent students are not necessarily quarantine students. They're just regular absent students. So in our counter, the term quarantine students for purposes of this document is defined as a student who is absent due to exposure to COVID-19, has tested positive for COVID-19, is awaiting a medical test result, under an order of quarantine, or sent home due to on-campus exposure. So we feel like it still encompasses all the scenarios relative to someone being infected and or exposed. We just wanted to make sure that we want to make sure that the extra work that is envisioned in this, our understanding is it's for quarantine students, not for students who are absent or on vacation or otherwise don't want to come to class, or maybe there's a test that day, so they skip that tested period and they stay home and want to watch all, or I guess if with your clarification, they wouldn't be able to watch the periods. But we just want to make sure this is a MOU about quarantine students more so than a distance learning MOU, I guess.
Okay.
Item D, we had struck, again, pending some clarification there with regards to cameras and recording. Item 3, PLCs, we just went with the language that we used in last year's MOU, which clarifies what has been past practice for the past 5 years. As a reminder, PLC meetings are voluntary and should be teacher-led. That's literally the sentence from the last year's MOU. So we hope that's important to reinforce, because again, as time is an issue this year because of increased duties and responsibilities, we want to make sure that teachers still have that ability to say, look, I've got a lot of work to do. I missed my planning today because I covered for a sub. I can't make it to a PLC. I'll make it when I am able to make it. We want to maintain that. Item 4 is your tutoring rate language increase with an addition at the end that says increases shall be retroactive to the start of the school year. Item 5 is two items that we discussed last time. The first one is trying to increase the sub-coverage compensation for teachers who are pulled when there is no sub for a teacher who is absent. The numbers are the same as what was presented last time. The only difference that we added into item A is increased amount shall be retroactive to the start of the school year. Item B references the ESE, ESOL, and fine arts teachers that we discussed last time. You guys had indicated that you were fine potentially with the ESE and ESOL teachers not being pulled to substitute and then not being able to provide the legal service that they're supposed to the students they facilitate. We left fine arts in there because maybe just for conversation's sake or for clarification. So we've run into a problem, and this is why we tried to restrict the use of fine arts teachers as sub-coverage in our initial proposal. If a fine arts teacher who normally is tasked with providing relief time coverage to existing teachers is now substituting and cannot provide that relief time coverage, which is guaranteed by contract to regular classroom teachers in elementary school, if the fine arts teachers are covering, they're forcing a violation of the contract by virtue of denying the relief time if that's not provided. So I don't know if we've heard examples where teachers have lost relief time. I haven't heard any explanations of if the fine arts teachers are being used for sub-coverage, who is providing the relief time coverage for the regular classroom teachers. So I don't know if there's an answer to that would alleviate our concern, but we do have a concern if fine arts teachers are being used for sub-coverage, that the relief time in the contract for the rest is just not happening, which we're not comfortable with, because elementary school teachers, I always say it, have the toughest schedule in terms of time. They don't have the planning that the secondary do, and they watch these kids basically 24/7 because they have to be supervised during transitions and all that. Other than that, item B remained the same. So the fine arts item is the one that I wanted to point out that I know you had objection to, but if that question could somehow get answered at some point, that might alleviate some of our concerns.
Okay. In 5A, I think we cleared this up last time, but it's the $25 or the $37.50,
Yes.
right? Okay.
I apologize.
No problem.
I got that. Thank you. Number 6, we had discussed back and forth a little bit. We just wanted to make sure, and you might be able, again, to alleviate some of our concerns. We're hearing that the scenario we envisioned, where we wanted to make sure it was clear that the quarantine provision of the contract applied to, was if I come to work and I'm told by my principal that through contact tracing I now have to go home because a student tested positive or a coworker, that in that scenario, pending return protocols being followed, that the quarantine sick leave provision covers us. We think it does, but we've seen conflicting scenarios at schools where it hasn't, and it maybe has to be changed, but we wanted to make sure that that is the specific scenario we're talking about, where if I'm sent home because of contact tracing by my employer pending return, that is absolutely covered. We agree with you that this is not, if I come to school exhibiting symptoms of sickness and I go get tested and I'm negative and it turns out that I just came to school sick, we are not attempting to protect that scenario, and if that's the case, that is on the employee to bear the burden of the sick day cost. But we just needed at a minimum clarification for the scenario we described that we have concerns about, if not language akin to what we have here.
Okay.
And the last portion of the contract duration, as we expressed last time, we understand the district's desire to have a year-long agreement so that it's kind of knocked out and over with. We were flexible, but we want to express that based on our experience last year, that we need some level of comfort that if a legitimate concern comes up, whether it's through evolving COVID conditions or school working conditions, or something in this contract turns out that it wasn't as well thought out as either of us might have thought, and it needs to be adjusted, that the district will not just say, you know what, CTA and teachers and employees might benefit from this correction, but the district does not need to discuss it because the district is content. We feel like with the rapidly evolving nature of COVID and pandemic quarantine instruction, that we might want a little more assurance that the district would be willing to listen with fidelity and in good faith to legitimate concerns that might come up that had not been envisioned, or where this contract might not prove to have been satisfactory to an evolving situation. So for now, our preference is still the end of the first semester, but that is certainly something that, we're open to suggestions from your side to try to alleviate that concern.
Okay, understood.
And that would be it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to go over them.
You did a nice job of laying out. I think I understand everything. Does the team have any questions? Or the compensation component, just to be clear, that extends beyond the MOU, right? It speaks to the whole 21-22 school year. So that even if the MOU ends December or whatever, we're talking about potential salary settlement for the entire contract year.
That's certainly our desire in a perfect world for us, because we feel like there's been a significant amount of work kind of already down paid through last year, where no additional compensation was really incorporated in that MOU, and then this year, particularly with regards to cameras and recordings, which teachers they worry about that because of their experience last year. Yes, we would. While the bonus money is one time and directly related to the increased workload over the past 2 years, we feel that the raise, in our view, would be best settled simultaneously if that's something the district is amenable to. And the raise would be reoccurring, whereas those bonuses would not be.
Okay, I understand. Well, I appreciate you bringing a comprehensive proposal to the table, and to take kind of what we did the last session and merging our proposals together. I think it makes it easy to follow and then to move forward from here. I know we have a session scheduled tomorrow. Seeing that compensation is kind of a big component of this, and we're not just talking about, bless you, we're not really just talking about language here and there. And I understand your position that you feel like the teachers have already kind of anteed up with their efforts to date throughout the pandemic. That is something we're also hearing from some of the other employee groups. I think when the governor issued his $1,000 bonuses for a select group of our workforce, that has prompted a lot of questions from all the other groups saying, hey, what about me? I've had a rough time of it as well. So what I've done is I've scheduled a closed-door executive session with our school board next Wednesday on the 22nd, which gives them an opportunity to kind of start discussing collective bargaining strategy for this current school year. So what I'd like to do is maybe go ahead and cancel tomorrow's session, give our team a chance to evaluate a proposal, start looking through our finances and our federal funds and see what may be possible on our end, and then schedule a follow-up bargaining session sometime subsequent to the 22nd, and then not to but shortly thereafter.
And that sounds
Understand.
fine to us. Yes.
Okay. We'll work on getting a couple more dates scheduled in with you. This was a special Wednesday night appearance here in the boardroom. Yeah. We were lucky to get it vacant. We were here last night. So anyway, that's sometimes our challenge, is just getting the room with the cameras and all that good stuff. But we'll make it work, and we'll reach out, to you and Mr. Harris, and get some dates and get the teams back together.
Thank you. We definitely
Sounds
appreciate
good.
the time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.